Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Devotions. Pastor Mark Driscoll here with Prepare the Way. Glad that you're here with us this morning to spend some time in the Word. We are going through the book of Acts, and we are right in the middle of Paul's journey through into Jerusalem and heading toward Rome as we near the end of this amazing journey of Paul's work for the gospel. And as we read it, we see what God has to say to us. You know, we're not just reading history so that we can say, oh, wasn't that great what Paul did. Hold on one moment, please. Oh, there we go. So we're not just reading it so we can marvel at Paul, but the words of God. God's word was given to us to instruct us, to show us how do we navigate life and how do we follow what God has for us in the world, and how do we fulfill the calling. As believers, you know, we have a holy calling, and that calling doesn't depend on our goodness. It doesn't depend on how gifted we are or how rich we are, smart we are, what race we are, all that crazy stuff everybody's fighting about all the time. It's about who He is in us, and it's about bringing glory to His name. It's by His purpose. You know, Paul told Timothy, he said, He's called us with a holy calling, not according to our works, but according to His purpose and grace. And so as we read these words, let's find strategy, let's find direction, comfort, encouragement today for what God has called us to do in His move to bring in the kingdom of heaven as we prepare for the coming of His Son. Can we pray together? Jesus, thank You for being close to us. Thank You that You stand by us, Lord, at the end of the day in our difficult times. Lord, I thank You that You're with us in all circumstances, in all situations. And Lord, You're always calling us and directing us and leading us. And Lord, I pray You bless us now as we look into Your word, that You'd search our hearts and draw us close to You. I pray, Lord, if there's anybody who does not yet know You, that they would, through this message, Lord, they would turn to You and trust in You. In Jesus' name, amen. Paul is, one moment, preaching the gospel in Jerusalem. He has been arrested. He has been just about killed. He had to be rescued from the hands of the Jewish leaders by the tribune, the Roman tribune, who's a man who's in charge of 1,000 soldiers. He yanked Paul out of that riot, out of that crowd, and brought him to safety. And so now the tribune wants to know get down to the bottom of this thing. He's going, okay, what are these people so upset about? What are they so mad at this poor old guy? What are they so angry about? And when he finds out Paul's a Roman citizen, that makes him even want to know more, you know, what the situation is. And then we find that Paul, 3 words I want you to think about today: exposed, opposed, and composed. That's what we see happening here. That Paul exposes the darkness that's in that courtroom. But he is opposed by that darkness, and he is composed as his Lord stands beside him. You know, and that's so true of us, that as Jesus said that we're the light of the world. And that all sounds really nice, and we're all, oh, I'm the light of the world. But you understand that when you're the light of the world, according to Ephesians, the light exposes darkness. And when you do that, darkness doesn't respond well. So you got to understand that you are called to expose darkness. That doesn't mean you go around looking for trouble. That simply means you just shine. And just by virtue of being the light in the world, you're going to expose darkness. You're not even going to have to try. You're not supposed to go around looking for things to expose. Just be you in Christ, and whatever's around you is going to be exposed. It's just by living out your life. If you're an honest person in a room full of dishonest people, well, their dishonesty is going to be exposed whether you try or not. You don't have to say anything. Just be yourself. If you're a faithful person and all of your peer group are unfaithful people, well, sooner or later you're going to bump into that, and they're going to realize that there's a difference. And so, anyway, just being the light of the world is not always easy. Being the light of the world means confronting darkness just by virtue of the living out of your faith. And this is what we find with Paul. And we see what God does for him in the midst of this. So if you would, open your Bible to Acts chapter 22, the end of Acts 22, moves right into the beginning of chapter 23. So we're going to start at verse 30, and we're going to read on down to chapter 23, verse 11. And it's this one story of Paul standing before the Jewish council. It says, "But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, he, that being the tribune, the Roman leader, unbound him and commanded the chief priests and the council to meet, and he brought Paul down to set him before them." So this commander, he's really irritated with this whole situation. And he's really concerned because he's got a Roman citizen here who was just about killed. That's a serious charge. And so in that day, if you started writing, you try to kill a Roman citizen, you're in some serious hot water. And so he commands those leaders, the Jewish leaders, the council, the court, with the high priest and all of the Pharisees and Sadducees to come together. He commands them, we're going to settle this and we're going to find out whose head's going to roll. And so he gets them all together and he puts Paul in front of them. Now let's read what happens. "And looking intently at the council, Paul said, 'Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day.'" Now, that doesn't sound like a really bad thing to say. He said, look, all my life, I've tried to live according to God's commands. I've tried to be faithful to God. That's all he said. But look at the response to him simply saying, "I've tried to live my life by a good conscience." "And the high priest, Ananias, commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth." Wait a minute. What is that about? All Paul said was, I've tried to live by a good conscience. I've tried to do the right thing. And the high priest says, hit him. Somebody hit him. Now, let me before I tell you Paul's response, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15, there's a very clear rule there, law, that in the court, you're not to defer to the poor or to the great. You're not to show favor. In other words, you're not to show favoritism. You're not to be, and you are to bring out complete justice, and you're supposed to be completely fair to whoever is on trial. And so by commanding him to be struck, Ananias was simply trying to shut him up. He didn't want Paul to finish the story. Now, is that fair in court? What if you were trying to give testimony in court and the judge said, all right, somebody just shut them up so they can't tell what they saw? That would be horrible, right? Well, this is essentially what Ananias, the high priest, is doing. He's trying to shut Paul up so he doesn't give his testimony. But what he wants to do is what he did to Jesus. They took Jesus and they brought him to court long enough to get him on trial, find him guilty, and kill him. They didn't want him to testify. Ananias said, let's do the same thing to Paul. Let's just get him out of here. Get him in, say we had court, kill him. And here's what Paul did. Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. What? Are you sitting in judgment to judge me according to the law, and yet, contrary to the law, order me to be struck? Paul is exposing this darkness of this whole fake scenario. I wonder what the Tribune is thinking, watching all these religious people beat each other up. That's something to think about, isn't it? But anyway, let's keep going. Those who stood by said, would you revile God's high priest? How dare you speak against our high priest, even though he just did something really slimy and terrible? Are you getting what's happening here? You got this high priest who's really corrupt, and he's just trying to shut down the truth. So somebody hit him. Just hit him. And Paul said, God's going to hit you. And he uses the same phrase that Jesus used on the Pharisees. You whitewashed wall, you fake, you hypocrite. And then they said, how dare you speak of our high priest like that? And Paul said an interesting thing, and I've always been puzzled by this, but I think I get it now. And Paul said, I didn't know, brothers, that he was a high priest, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people. Now, I used to wonder about that. What in the world is that? Why is Paul all of a sudden changing gears here? And then suddenly I realized something. You know what Paul said? I didn't know he was the high priest. Why wouldn't Paul know he was the high priest? The guy's sitting there in his high priest regalia in his chair, surrounded by people. Of course he knows he's the high priest. You know what Paul's saying? It's kind of like what we used to say when we were being sarcastic with somebody and saying, you could have fooled me. In other words, oh, you're the high priest. I had no idea, because you're sure not acting like one. You see the point there? That Paul is not ignorant. He knew exactly who the high priest was. And even though he had been absent for a while, all you have to do is look, and you can tell who the high priest is. And so Paul knew exactly who he was. He was saying, I didn't know you were the high priest. In other words, when are you going to start acting like it? I mean, if you're the high priest, be a high priest, because right now you're not. And so you see, all of a sudden what Paul's doing is he is exposing the corruption just by simply speaking the truth. And so Paul gets a little confrontive here, doesn't he? He says, you're a hypocrite. You're a whitewashed wall. You're already doing wrong right here in front of the Roman tribunal. And you're already being corrupt. You can't just listen to the truth. You got to shut it down. The way you did it to Stephen when you killed him. The way you did it to Jesus with that midnight kangaroo court before you crucified him. You just can't live in truth, can you? Now, Paul was quite bold here. And he said, oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were the high priest. So understand that there's a little bit of snark going on here, but it's for the purpose of exposing something that's really dark. And and there's that element, isn't there, of the gospel that exposes darkness. Now, he's exposing darkness not in the world. We're not here to judge the world. He's exposing darkness in the chosen people of God. He's exposing darkness in the Jewish court. These are God's chosen people who are supposed to be a light in the world, and yet they're just adding more darkness. These are the people Jesus came and then rebuked, and he called, and he flipped the tables, and he confronted, and he said, listen, you guys, I'm right in front of you, and you're not even seeing me. And so Paul is saying, look, you guys, this is such hypocrisy. It's such hypocrisy. Then, after they all settle down, Paul begins to speak again. And I love the genius of Paul here. It's almost comical. It's almost comical. Listen to this. Starting in about verse 6. Now when Paul perceived that they were one part were Sadducees, and the other part Pharisees, he cried out in the council, brothers, I'm a Pharisee, of a son of Pharisees, and it is with respect to the hope and resurrection of the dead that I am on trial. And as he said this, a dissension arose. Listen to this explanation. A dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. Now here's why. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angel or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. All of a sudden, there's a political fight. God exposes the political hypocrisy in the leadership of Israel. He says, oh, I'm here to talk about the resurrection, because he knows that the Pharisees believe in the resurrection and the Sadducees don't. And he said, let's just turn this whole thing, turn their own weapons against them. Let's use their own darkness against them. Let's just show just how fake these people really are. Paul is not playing here. He's kind of playing this innocent card, but he's saying, but he is sincere. I'm not saying he's being insincere. I'm just saying that he's speaking the truth in such a way that exposes the darkness around him. And he's saying, look, I'm here to talk about resurrection. Anybody interested in that? And the Pharisees, wait a minute. We believe in that. And the Sadducees say, oh, no. There's no such thing as that. But he goes on. Then it says in verse 9, then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes of the Pharisee party stood up and listened to what they said and contended sharply. Listen, now these are the guys that just the day before were trying to kill Paul. Listen to what they say now. We find nothing wrong in this man. Really? Just a few hours ago you were trying to kill him. Oh, nothing wrong with this man. What if the spirit or an angel spoke to him? All of a sudden they're open to the possibility that God might be talking to Paul. And when the dissension became violent, The tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him into the barracks. So Paul starts this riot that essentially almost gets him killed, because you got the Sadducees trying to yank him this way. They want to kill him. The Pharisees all of a sudden, oh, he's one of us, and wants to. And all of a sudden, he's using their own divisiveness, their own political spirit against them, and he's exposing the idolatry, the duplicity, the fakeness. Because you know what? It is nothing but a political spirit. When your enemy starts saying what you want to hear, all of a sudden they become your friend. That's a political spirit. I know we've never seen anybody do that. Anyway, so here's the thing. The Pharisees are showing just how duplicitous, how fake and disingenuous they really are. One minute, let's kill Paul because he's talking about Jesus. Next minute, oh, Paul's one of us, right? It's kind of like when you get to elections and you see you go through the primaries and all these folks on both parties are lashing out at each other. Oh, you're a terrible candidate. You shouldn't be president. Oh, you're awful. You shouldn't be president. And all of a sudden, one of them gets nominated. You are our golden child. We just love you. We support you 100%. And that, it's just such a fake thing, right? It's such a dishonest thing. And I get it, but it's just crazy. But when the people of God start playing that way, see, that's just wrong. That's evil. When the people of God can't stand for truth, unless it suits their political agenda, that's what. Now, when you see that among the people of God, you got a problem. So you understand, the Bible says judgment begins at the house of God. That God always begins to shake up his people before he goes and deals with the world. And that's, and so here's the thing. Paul is exposing God's chosen people, the leadership of Israel. He is exposing the fact that they are hypocrites. They're politically motivated and of a political spirit. And they'll go with anybody that says what they want to hear. And so it's just this game that Paul exposes, this whole kangaroo court thing going on. Now, the problem with that is that in both cases, all Paul did was tell his story. I mean, okay, in one moment, he really let the high priest have it. But other than that, he just said, look, guys, I'm just here to tell my story. And his story exposed everything. Sometimes the reason people don't want to hear you talk about Jesus, can I just tell you? It's not because of anything wrong with you. It's because your story exposes their darkness. Now, that's why. Now let's keep it in the church, though, right? Because we've got to deal with our own people. When you're in church and you're on fire for God, and you're getting all about it, right? And you're reading your Bible, you're praying, and you're sharing your testimony and worship. There's going to be people in church who don't like you. They're going to oppose you. I hope they don't hit you or try to pull you apart, but they're just not going to like you because your light is shining so bright, their lukewarmness is being exposed. I hate to say it, but it's true. I hate to say, I've seen as a pastor, I've seen so many times you get a couple coming in, a family that's on fire for God, and they come into a fellowship that's gotten a little bit sleepy and a little bit kind of, complacent. And all of a sudden everybody's irritated at these new people because they're praying, they're worshiping, they're holding their hands up in worship, and they're testifying, and everybody starts criticizing them. Oh, they just think they're better than everybody else. No, they don't. They're just living out their faith. They're just living out their faith, and you're mad at them because it makes you aware of your own lukewarmness. If you're finding yourself getting irritated with people who are on fire for God, then probably you need to spend some time at the altar because it's not a problem with them. You see, what Paul did was he let his light shine, he exposed the darkness, and the darkness opposed him. And so you have to understand that you're going to be opposed. That even the people of God, if they're not walking with him, if they're not going after him, and you're going after him, they might come after you. But here's what happened at the end of the day. I love verse 11. At the end of the day, Paul is nursing his wounds. He's finally in a quiet place, away from all the noise, away from all the accusation, away from all the fake, and he's just kind of got some time alone. And then something happens. Look at verse 11. The following night, the Lord stood by him. Underline that in your Bible. The Lord stood by him. The following night, the Lord stood by him. and said, take courage. As you've testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify in Rome. Here's what Jesus was doing. First of all, very first thing, he stood by him. I want you to understand something. If you're shining your light and you're standing for truth and you're loving people and you're really giving it to God and you're loving him, and people, first of all, understand you're going to be opposed because you're going to shake up somebody's demons. You're going to rattle somebody's cage, and somebody's not going to like it. People who prefer darkness don't like light, and so that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, Jesus is standing by you. That is such fantastic news. It says the Lord stood by him. I want you to know, in the middle of your struggle, in the middle of all the opposition, in the middle of those people who want you to be politically correct instead of eternally correct, those people who want you to go with the vibe of this world, those who want you just to play church while they kind of sit in the comfort of their own lukewarmness, they get mad at you because you're on fire for God. Listen, and they'll call you a fanatic, they'll call you a legalist, they'll call you a holy roller, they'll call you all this stuff. Listen, you stay true to him, and he will stand by you. Isn't that great news? The Lord's standing by you today. In the middle of it, you're exposing darkness. Darkness is opposing you, and Jesus is going to compose you. To compose means to pull you together, right? That's what a composer does with an orchestra. They pull all of it together, right? And they bring some harmony and order and sense to it. You know, I need God to compose my soul, compose and quiet my soul, right, when I'm being opposed, when I'm being attacked, when I'm being discouraged. I feel like I'm being pulled in 50 directions. My Lord stands by me, and if I'll let him, he'll compose and quiet my soul, like it says in the Psalms, like a weaned child. I rest against the Lord like a weaned child. Lord, compose and quiet my soul. Listen, he stands by you. He composes you. Now, that compose also means something else. When you're composing something, that means you're creating something, right? What did he say to Paul? He said, look, you've done a great job here in Jerusalem. Now you're going to Rome. Now, there's some discomfort because that meant more suffering. That meant more trial. That meant more difficulty. He wasn't going to retire and ease and sail off to the Bahamas or something. He was going to a harder place. But he said, you know what? You testified here, and I'm going to help you testify there. And I'm composing something. I've got a bigger picture, Paul. This ain't it. I've got something bigger. Right in the middle of your fight right now, I want you to know something. Your composer is composing you, but he's also composing your destiny. He's got a destiny for you that's greater than what the chapter you're in right now. He's got a next step for you that's greater than the calling you've got right now. You be faithful in Jerusalem, and he'll bless you in Rome. Are you listening to me? Some of you right now, you think this is it. You've been wrung out and strung out, and you've been fought against and opposed, and you're trying to be faithful, and you're saying, God, why is this happening to me? I'm doing the right thing, and I'm being treated like I'm doing the wrong thing. You're in great company. You're in company with Paul, all the apostles, all the prophets, and most of all, you're in great company with our Lord Jesus, because he was the innocent one. He was the sinless one, and yet he was taken through a kangaroo court, and he was whipped and beaten and tortured and brutally murdered on a cross to redeem the world. It's through his shed blood that we have forgiveness of sins. It's the innocent one who took all of our guilt on himself when he died on the cross. But the glorious news, on the third day, he rose again from the dead, and he is now seated in the right hand of God the Father Almighty. So the one who died for our sins and rose from the dead, and the one who is seated at the right hand of God, is standing by you in your time of opposition. So you trust in him. You rest in him, and let him compose you. Let him hold on to you, because he's got a great work for you. Let me read to you what Paul wrote, and I wonder if he was thinking about his time in the book of Acts. I wonder if he was thinking about his time in Jerusalem when he wrote this to the Ephesians. Let me close with this passage. Paul writes, starting in verse 1, Paul writes, therefore be imitators of God. This is your charge today, and walk in as beloved children, and walk in love. As Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness or foolish talk or crude joking, which are out of place. But instead, let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or who is covetous, that's an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words of, for example, words of tolerance, for example. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not become partners with them. For listen to this, for at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. You are light in the Lord. Listen to this. Walk as children of light, for the fruit of light is found in all that is good and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part, listen to this, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to speak of the things they do in secret. Don't spend your time talking about darkness all the time. That's shameful. Don't waste your time dwelling on darkness and talking about that. The more you talk about light, the more the darkness will be exposed by itself. Listen to this. It's shameful to speak of those things they do in secret, but when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible. For anything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you. Listen, you focus on being the light. You focus on Him. You focus on speaking light. Don't speak darkness. Speak light. Live light. Pray light. Believe light. Lean on the light. Trust in light. The darkness will take care of itself. And the Lord will shine on you. Wake up. Wake up from your slumber. Wake up from compromise. Wake up from lukewarmness. Wake up from religious pretense. And get on fire for God. Give Him 100%. And Christ will shine on you. I want you today to say, Lord, I want to be on fire for you today. Set me aflame today. Let the world watch me burn with the glory of God. Help me to be all about you and not to go halfway. Give everything I am to Him. Give everything you've got to the Lord today. Allow Him to influence everything you do and every relationship you've got. And don't be ashamed of Him. And when the darkness starts fighting back, celebrate, because you're standing right with the Lord Jesus Christ. And what you've done today in Jerusalem, God's got a bigger dream for you in Rome. He's got a bigger call coming down the road. Be faithful where you are, and He's got something greater. He's standing by you today. God bless you. Go in peace.